Well, hello again from what is an absolutely glorious Whitley Park. Sadly, my friend on the lawnmower there, he's got it in top gear. I think he's trying to set his personal best up and down the pitch, and good luck to him. That's his prerogative, of course, but we'll take a little bit of a walk. I'll acquaint you with the layout of the buildings here. There's a wall, but up above us there, the windows, that is Newcastle Scouting, and below, Media HQ, and then behind the trees, you can hear Newcastle are training. So we'll take a little wander out of the front, which is a Bowls Green. I don't think I've never seen Steve Nixon and the gang on here yet. There is a putting green actually at the training ground, which I think is used a little more often. It certainly wasn't Bobby Robson's day, but anyway, this is an appropriate setting here because, like I say, the top windows there, that is where you do see the likes of Steve Nixon, Andy Howe and others. And where we're going to start this reflection, because we've just been in the bottom room talking to Eddie Howe ahead of Sunday's trip to Brighton, and there are 4 huge matches to come. You know, the focus really should be on the football and the Champions League, but the big story we're all writing from this morning is Eddie Howe's transfer admission, bombshell admission if you want to talk in our journalistic language. Now, Eddie has said that the club are ready and the club want to raid rivals, those who are vulnerable because of a PSR deficit, like Newcastle were last summer. And he said, you know, it was our turn last year. We were the ones who had that deficit to satisfy. And quite rightly, Eddie's words, he said, other clubs did look to take advantage. Now the tables have turned. It's Newcastle who want to take advantage of others. And I suppose for you guys, that message will be thoroughly reassuring and exciting even, and so it should be, because it's been too long now. It's been 3 windows without a serious first team edition. You've got to go back to the summer of 2023 really. Lewis Hall, Tino Livramento, Harvey Barnes, Sandro Tonali. Nothing has come in since then, which for me, and I've said this many times, makes it even more of a miracle. Eddie Howe and the job his coach and staff have done in taking the team to this point. Of any of their rivals going for the top 5, competing for trophies? Have any of their managers had to do without a first team signing in 3 windows? Well, the answer is no. Eddie Howe has done, and that is why the job he has done this season, I said this in my reflections after last weekend in Monday's Daily Mail, it's why for me he should be in the conversation for Manager of the Year. Now, what is different this time around going into the summer is that Newcastle are in a position of strength. It's something I'd spoken about in previous videos, that while you talk about this summer and what they want for next season, there's 2 transfer windows. There actually are literally 2 transfer windows this year, because FIFA have introduced a little window at the start of June to allow clubs in the Club World Cup to go out and potentially buy players to strengthen their showpiece event over in the States. But the point Eddie Howe makes and the point I make about the 2 transfer windows are, it's pre-June the 30th and after June the 30th. And pre-June the 30th is what we're talking about here. When, like Newcastle last summer, when they contemplated selling Anthony Gordon to Liverpool to avoid that 10-point deduction, when in the end they had to sell Elliot Anderson against their wishes for what was in effect £15 million, bringing in a goalkeeper who's only played 45 minutes since, Newcastle were vulnerable. Forest did prey on them. Brighton, Sunday's opponents, of course, to a lesser extent. Yankube and Minte went there for £33 million. In my opinion, based on what I've seen of Minte so far this season, yes, it would have been beneficial, and Newcastle probably would have liked to have kept them in an ideal world, but I don't think that was a massively unfair deal on reflection, like I say. So, well done to Amanda Staveley for negotiating that. But those were the deals that meant Newcastle jumped the right side of those permitted losses. This year, it's different. Who could they prey on, for want of a better phrase, even though that is the reality? You are looking to take advantage. That was the phrase Eddie used. Well, there's Bournemouth, there's Aston Villa as well. Now, we were just debating amongst ourselves inside there. There's been talk in recent days of Aston Villa having to sell Morgan Rogers this summer. Where would he play if Newcastle were to throw the hat in the ring there? Well, he could go to the right. I think the issue with Rodgers, and this is what we all settled on inside there, is that his best position is absolutely a number 10. I would be surprised if Newcastle weren't on Morgan Rogers. As much as I would love that to be the case from a journalist who covers Newcastle up here, I think he's a wonderful player. But who are the more realistic targets? Well, you look at Bournemouth. There's There's Antoine Semenyo, the right winger. I revealed this in my, not revealed, I think we've known it for a while now, but in my Newcastle Confidential column yesterday, I asked for your questions. Thank you for the scores that came in. Really was huge take up on that. Great interaction. I'll put the link in the description below to take you through to that. But of course, a lot of the questions, what you guys want to talk about, understandably so, are transfers and transfer targets. Well, let's just look at Bournemouth, given Bournemouth and Villa have been identified as those two clubs who Newcastle could look to raid, again, going back to my journalistic speak. Well, Antoine Semenyo, the right winger, now there's talk of a price tag of 60 million plus for him. I really don't see that, especially not if they're in a position of financial peril. There's Dean Hussan, the centre-back, who Newcastle absolutely like. Now, I mentioned this in the column yesterday. This has been information for a while now. He probably is going elsewhere. I don't think Newcastle necessarily see him as a realistic target. So there's two there. Aston Villa, well, Morgan Rogers is the name that's being mentioned. I can't really see that with Newcastle, but nonetheless, as Eddie Howe said, I can't go into specific detail, and others at the club are working hard on that. So perhaps there might be a surprise, but certainly the headline news to come out of today's press conference with Eddie was that admission that they are looking to take advantage before that June the 30th deadline. And yeah, that is good news given what we've been through. I speak for you as supporters and us as journalists in recent transfer windows. There's nothing better, to use that phrase, there's nothing better for clicks, engagement and for interaction, for excitement than new signings, new arrivals. And we haven't had that for a few windows now. So hopefully, it looks like, and hopefully that was in my very best Geordie there, wasn't it? Yeah, I suddenly reverted back to Arvidas and Pet. Hopefully, this summer is shaping up to be that, and it needs to be as well, because they're on the cusp of something exciting, something special here. And that was something else Eddie talked about when he was pressed on. And I know he doesn't like this. He wants to change the narrative to incomings rather than outgoings. But nonetheless, there were two questions about the likes of Isaac and others potentially being the subject of offers from elsewhere. And Eddie said no. It was a really good, strong answer. He said, let's focus on what we can achieve here, and what they can achieve, of course, is Champions League football. And that then extended into the question I asked him when I said, can you explain from your position the difference between being in the Champions League and not being in the Champions League with regards incomings, outgoings, the ability to award players new contracts, everything else? He said, well, I prefer not to focus on the consequence of not being in the Champions League. I prefer for my players to focus on the achievement of making that top five. And that is why now we've spoken about it for so many weeks. These last 4 games, every kick, every point is crucial. Even last night, Eddie admitted he was watching Nottingham Forest versus Brentford, and no doubt cheering on Brentford. That was a huge result for Newcastle, especially given Forest and Chelsea play each other on that last day. If Newcastle can beat Chelsea, I've said this for a long time now, this game next week back at St James's Park is shaping up for me to be a shootout where the winner probably will take one of those Champions League spots. Now, before that, of course, there is the trip down to Brighton on Sunday. And when it comes to my prediction, I said this to the guys inside, I can't really, with any confidence, predict a Newcastle victory. Is that scar tissue of recent years? You know, there's been some bad ones. Remember the early season visit last year with Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton in midfield, and it just screamed that really wasn't going to work. It's working now, albeit they're going to have to be without Joe Linton on Sunday. An update to come on that in just a second. But I think you'll know what I mean when there's just a little bit of trepidation from a Newcastle perspective now about going to Brighton. And I can't with any great degree of confidence say that they're going to go there and win, as much as they have won 20 from the last 26. They've got to go there and show me something different. Now, Eddie was asked, are Brighton something of a bogey team? He said, no, he doesn't believe in that. But there's clearly a way Brighton play, and this season as well, you know, the 2 games at St James's earlier in the year, whereby Newcastle do have a little bit of an issue with them. So yeah, guys, again, you might not want to hear this, but I think if Newcastle can go there and avoid defeat on Sunday, that might not be the worst thing in the world. It would probably guarantee, given the way the goal difference is, that they do stay ahead of Forest and Chelsea, regardless of what they do this weekend. So yeah, guys, I would probably settle again, you know, with my Newcastle covering journalistic hat on. I think a point down at Brighton this weekend might not be the worst thing in the world, especially as for me, they've got those 2 winnable home games left. Chelsea and Everton on the final day. Now we're getting distracted a little bit by the football there. Now, yeah, let's get back to transfers. And this was in my Newcastle Confidential column yesterday. A lot of questions about Bryan and Mbeumo, Matheus, Cunha, Marc, Guehi, James Trafford. So I'll just rattle through the four of those names just quickly. Well, James Trafford is one I think Newcastle will absolutely try to do. Now, Burnley's promotion in terms of affecting the asking price, let's wait and see on that. But Newcastle do want a new goalkeeper. I think it's been the want and the need now really for a while to evolve, to bring in a ball player who would act as that fifth defender really. Nick Pope has been a fantastic signing for Newcastle. He continues to be a fantastic signing and a really important player. Good character, you know. Pope still probably will have a huge say in Newcastle making the Champions League or not in the remaining 4 matches. So perhaps we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but nonetheless, I think James Trafford, well, I know James Trafford is a player they've identified. It very nearly happened this summer. The player himself is really keen on it. So wait and see on that front. Let's go up the pitch. Marc, definitely one to keep an eye on now. Didn't happen last summer, was well publicised. I think Newcastle, if the price is right and if there's a deal to be done, I think they will be back at the table for Marc into midfield. Well, we'll skip midfield, going into the wing areas. Now, Bryan and Mbeumo are revealed in the Confidential column. In January, Steve Nickson went down to watch him in Brentford's 2-2 draw with Manchester City. He's a proven Premier League right winger who scored 18 goals this season. They would come in and improve Newcastle. So what is not to like? Newcastle do like him. It's just the price tag. When Paul Mitchell spoke to us last summer, post-window in the September, and he said that the model wasn't fit for purpose, he probably was talking to deals such as Mbeumo, £60 million plus for a player who was almost 26. Now, I get where Mitchell's coming from. They want to buy the stars before they are proven stars with that pedigree. Now, to that end, I don't necessarily see Mbeumo. I don't. Now, that then leads us into talk of Matheus Cunha, and you might be shouting back, well, what about Cunha? His release clause is 62.5 million. I just think with Cunha, Newcastle were looking at that, and it was a case of almost two signings in one. Given his versatility, Newcastle believe he can be a 7, a really viable 9, a proper backup to Alexander Isak, a 9 and 11, or coming back into midfield as an 8. So given Cunha, personally, I think is probably a better all-round footballer than Mbeumo with a higher ceiling as well. I can see why Newcastle were aligned on Matheus Cunha, but the latest information on that is Manchester United are offering him 50, 60, 70, 80 grand more than probably what would currently be on the table at Newcastle. And if Manchester United then go and get Champions League, it looks like they're going to be in the Europa League final against Spurs, that would make that deal probably almost impossible to do from Newcastle's perspective. But let's wait and see. He's absolutely a player they do like. Now, sticking with Brazilians, and the news I brought you earlier this week exclusively at Mail Online, Daily Mail, that Joe Linton, his season is almost certainly done now. That's been confirmed by Eddie Howe inside. Now, the good news is the visit to the specialist last week, it wasn't news of an ACL or a really serious knee injury, just that it was best if he rested during the remaining 4 games. A slight aggravation of the problem which has been plaguing him now for a few months. So I don't expect to see Joe Linton again this season. That's a huge blow. Eddie Howe said inside he's returned to Brazil right now. With Joe Linton, they would never write him off. The player, when he does return, probably will be absolutely pushing and saying, I'm okay. But yeah, Eddie Howe said it's unlikely they probably won't see Joe Linton again this season. And that's a blow for all of those obvious reasons. I said last week, the home game against Ipswich isn't the type where Newcastle would miss Joe Linton. They absolutely will down at Brighton. They absolutely will against Chelsea at home, and then against Arsenal away at the Emirates. He's that big occasion type player. But it's a chance now for Joe Willock to come in. And I would hope with Joe Willock, he wasn't great last weekend, but I would hope with a run of games, with continued selection, a little bit of love, mentally and physically improving game on game, that he could and should get back to somewhere close to his best during the remaining matches. And he's going to have to be, because you just cannot underestimate the significance and the magnitude of these next 4 and the difference between being a Champions League club and a Europa League club. Be a Champions League club and they can do what we talked about at the top of this video. They can go and pray, they can go and rage, they can go and take advantage of other clubs. Without it, well, it might not be so easy. So yeah, guys, let's end that there, taking it down to Brighton on Sunday. Absolutely massive, and Tell me what you think below the line. Would you take that point if you were Newcastle this weekend down there, given the really sticky record at the Amex? In terms of all the signings, all the names I've spoken about there, which one do you fancy the most? What do you think's realistic? What would you do? Semenyo at Bournemouth, you know, might not be if they do have financial woes. Could he be the one who they go in with, you know, at an offer below what would be market value, given what we saw happen with Newcastle with Elliot Anderson last year, going for, in effect, £50 million. It's exciting, it's newsy, there's loads of debate, loads of interaction to be had, as ever. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.